Solitude, that word that stirs up mixed emotions. For some, a refuge. For others, an invisible threat that weighs on the soul. We were taught to fear it, to see it as a shadow that lurks when the noise of the world fades away. But what if solitude wasn't the enemy? What if, instead of consuming us, it could shape us, make us better, make us more human? Great thinkers like Nietzsche and Schopenhauer understood that the mind needs its space, its pause, its retreat from the incessant stream of voices and expectations that surround us. In isolation, they believed, independent thought flourishes, the depth of existence becomes tangible, and the noise of the superficial fades away. They weren't talking about imposed solitude, the kind that feels like a punishment, but about chosen, understood, and valued solitude. Nietzsche, in his work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, presents his protagonist as a hermit who, after years of solitude in the mountains, returns to society with wisdom that could only be found in retreat. For him, solitude was the path to self-transcendence, the possibility of overcoming the limitations imposed by morality and social conventions. Similarly, Schopenhauer saw solitude as a means to achieve true inner peace. In the world as will and representation, he argued that life is full of suffering, and only in introspection can we find a refuge from the pain of existence. In literature and art, this concept has been explored through characters who embody solitude as a source of self-knowledge. A clear example is Raskolnikov from Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, who, in his isolation, faces the torments of his own conscience. We can also find it in figures like Captain Ahab from Moby Dick, whose solitude consumes him in his obsession. Or even in Don Quixote, who, though accompanied by Sancho, lives in a world of intellectual solitude, separate from reality. Beyond literature, history has shown us great figures who embraced solitude as a means of growth. Leonardo da Vinci, for example, spent long periods in isolation to develop his theories and inventions. Emily Dickinson, the famous poet, lived much of her life apart from the world, finding in solitude the inspiration for her immortal work. Even Nikola Tesla, with his futuristic vision of electricity and energy, preferred retreat over social distraction, convinced that genius flourishes in silence. In today's world, where contact is immediate and constant, solitude seems like an unnatural state, something to be avoided at all costs. We are taught that being alone is synonymous with emptiness, sadness, something that must urgently be filled. But, paradoxically, we live in an era where hyperconnectivity gives us the illusion of always being accompanied. Social media allows us to interact at any moment, receive immediate responses, feel that we are part of something bigger. However, this sense of socialization is often superficial. A like is not equivalent to a hug. A message does not always imply a real connection. Many people, surrounded by virtual interactions, feel more alone than ever, because they have replaced introspection and authentic contact with the constant need for external validation. Social media, trivial conversations, endless notifications, hyperconnectivity gives us the impression of always being in company. But in reality, it immerses us in a deeper form of loneliness. Each digital interaction is fleeting, a simulation of connection that rarely leaves room for authenticity. We have grown accustomed to constant but superficial presence, where the absence of internal silence prevents us from truly listening to ourselves. We surround ourselves with stimuli, but deep down, we still feel alone. Because true connection cannot be built on rush and immediacy. Everything seems designed to escape from ourselves. But what if we didn't flee? What if we allowed ourselves to be in silence with our own existence? We live in an era where being alone is almost seen as a failure. Social media has transformed our perception of solitude and socialization, imposing the idea that constant interaction is synonymous with success and happiness. The need for approval has become a collective anxiety, where every post, every message, and every reaction seems to define our value. But, in reality, this dynamic has distanced us from the possibility of genuinely enjoying solitude, of seeing it as a space for growth rather than a lack. Hyperconnectivity has conditioned us to believe that our worth depends on how many people surround us, how many messages we receive, how many invitations fill our agenda. But this obsession with constant company has made us forget that solitude is not absence, but presence of oneself. Solitude, when understood, has the power to show us who we really are. In it, we discover thoughts we didn't know, emotions that had been silenced by the rush of daily life. We learn to tolerate ourselves, to embrace our shadows and lights without the need for external validation. It forces us to see ourselves without filters, without adornments, without distractions. It makes us better because it allows us to build our own sense, an identity that does not depend on the approval of others. In solitude, we develop patience, introspection, creativity. We learn to enjoy our own company, to trust our thoughts without the noise of others' opinions. It is in stillness where the deepest ideas are born, where true emotional strength is nurtured. Even science has shown the benefits of solitude. Studies have indicated that periods of isolation can increase creativity, strengthen emotional resilience, and improve problem-solving abilities. Meditation, mindfulness, and other introspective practices are based on the power of silence and chosen solitude as a means of growth. But solitude also hurts. It is not always a serene and revealing experience. Sometimes it is harsh, uncomfortable, a mirror we don't want to look into. However, that pain also shapes us. It pushes us to question ourselves, to grow, to find meaning in our own voice. And when we manage to get through it without fear, without anxiety, we discover that it is not a punishment, but a teacher. It's important to distinguish between chosen solitude and imposed solitude. The first is a choice, a space we decide to inhabit in order to meet ourselves. The second, on the other hand, can be devastating, as it implies unwanted isolation, exclusion, the feeling that no one sees or understands us. This is where we must find the balance, learning to enjoy solitude without letting it consume us. Perhaps the question shouldn't be whether solitude is good or bad. Perhaps the real question is how we face it, how we embrace it without losing ourselves in it. How we turn it into a tool for getting to know ourselves better and being more authentic. Because in the silence of solitude, away from the noise of the world, we might find what we truly are. And now, I ask you, how do you live solitude? Is it a refuge or a prison? Tell me in the comments. Share this video if you think it can make someone else reflect. And subscribe if you want to keep exploring these thoughts that cross us all.